Greetings. Today we delve into a story that transforms everything we thought we knew about aerial combat in World War II. This is the tale of the P-47 Thunderbolt, a legendary American fighter flying over northern France in 1944, and how it underwent a radical evolution that shattered German tactics and turned the skies into a battlefield of unprecedented power and agility. But what if the mighty Thunderbolt was not as predictable as everyone believed? Could a single move in midair change the course of the air war? How did a fighter known for its sluggish climb suddenly become a climbing demon capable of matching the Germans' best? Was it simply luck, or did engineers unlock a secret that made the P-47 a different beast altogether? And what groundbreaking innovation allowed this transformation to happen? Something that could give an aircraft over 30 years ahead of its time. Imagine a fighter heavy enough to weigh over 7 tons, yet suddenly capable of climbing like a nimble bird of prey. Picture a roar so fierce it seemed to shake the very heavens, with wisps of steam trailing from its exhaust. Signs of a new explosive power. How could a machine long perceived as cumbersome and predictable turn into a master of vertical combat? Was this a fluke or the dawn of a new era in fighter aviation? All these questions swirl around a single, central mystery. How did the P-47 Thunderbolt, long regarded as a brute force escort, become an agile predator in the skies over Europe? And what secrets did engineers hide in the shadows that made this possible? Today we promise to uncover the truth, tracing the journey from invention to transformation, separating myth from reality, and revealing a shocking story of innovation that changed aerial warfare forever. The most astonishing part is just ahead. So stay tuned as we begin the story of how the Thunderbolt's hidden evolution rewrote the rules of combat. And it all starts right now, with the first chapter of a legend reborn. On the cold gray dawn of February 15th, in the year 1944, the scene unfolded over a section of northern France that had become a battlefield of relentless air combat. It was around 1 o'clock in the afternoon when Lieutenant Aberluten and Hans Wim, stationed in Marseille, observed a formation of 8 American Republic P-47 Thunderbolts approaching from the west, their wings cutting through the winter sky at an altitude of 23,000 feet. The contrails they left behind stretched across the chilly firmament like ghostly white fingers reaching out in anticipation, their icy tendrils seemingly beckoning toward the German Messerschmitt Bf 109G6 that was maneuvering below. Suddenly, the lead plane in the American squadron did something that made the blood in the German pilot's veins run cold. A move so unexpected that it shattered every preconception he held about these formidable fighters. It was an action that signaled a fundamental shift in the air war over Europe, a moment that would be etched into the memory of those watching as the day when the American advantage vanished before their eyes. The lead Thunderbolt, defying all expectations, was climbing at an angle that should have been impossible for a machine weighing over 7 tons. Its twin Pratt and Whitney R2800 double Wasp engines roared with a fury that Hans Wim had never heard before. A raw, unrelenting sound that echoed the unleashed power of a beast in full fury. In that instant, the entire dynamic of aerial combat shifted, and Major Wolfgang Fahl, commanding the second flight of German fighters, recognized that something extraordinary was unfolding. The formation of Messerschmitt Rehrbeif 109 G6s from Squadron Jägerschwader. 2 had been dispatched on what ground control called a routine bomber escort mission, a task they had been executing with increasing confidence since the Americans introduced their massive P-47 Thunderbolt the previous spring. The Thunderbolt, an aircraft so heavy and ponderous in its ascent that it had long been considered predictable, had earned the reputation of being an unwieldy giant in the sky, more suited to brute force than agility. German pilots had devised a standard tactic to exploit this perceived weakness. When faced with the Thunderbolt, they would pull into a steep climb, knowing that the heavy American fighter, with its sluggish ascent, would be unable to follow. They would then watch with satisfaction as the American pilots, frustrated, broke off their pursuit, unable to match the German climb rate, and would either turn away or stall, helplessly wallowing in their inability to keep up. It had become a familiar dance, one that had served them well for nearly a year, allowing the Germans to outmaneuver the American fighters time and again from above, executing quick, deadly firing passes before zooming away to safety. But now, in the midst of this familiar scene, Major Fowl saw something unprecedented. The lead Thunderbolt, sporting the distinctive checkered nose of the 78th Fighter Group, maintained its climb angle with an astonishing determination, matching the German fighter's altitude gains meter for meter. The massive radial engine roared with a different, more violent sound, deeper and more aggressive than the typical roar of a piston engine, and thin wisps of what appeared to be steam or smoke trailed from the exhaust stacks, hinting at a transformation in the aircraft's performance. Fowl, who had been flying combat missions since the dark days of the Battle of Britain, had faced a wide array of formidable opponents: Spitfires, Hurricanes, Soviet Yaks, Lags, and American P-38 Lightnings, and P-51 Mustangs. Yet the P-47 Thunderbolt had always been a predictable beast, relentless yet ponderous, a brute force escort that could dive with the ease of a falling safe but struggled in the climb, often described as climbing like a pregnant whale. German pilots had learned to exploit this flaw, leveraging their superior climb rate and maneuverability to ambush the American formations from above, execute swift firing passes, and then zoom away, leaving the Thunderbolts struggling to pursue. This tactic had been remarkably successful for nearly a year, a testament to the Germans' tactical ingenuity. But now Fowl watched in disbelief as his wingman, attempting the standard escape climb with a P-47 latched onto his tail, was matched climb for climb by the American fighter. The Thunderbolt, with its checkered nose and massive engine, was defying every expectation, maintaining its angle of ascent with unwavering resolve, a feat that seemed almost impossible just moments before. Major Fowl understood in that instant that the transformation of the P-47 Thunderbolt had not occurred overnight, even if it appeared to be so to the German pilots suddenly faced with an opponent that had radically changed. The aircraft's capabilities, once thought to be limited in the vertical, had evidently undergone a remarkable evolution, and the American pilots had begun to unlock its new potential. The seemingly invincible advantage the Germans had enjoyed, based on the Thunderbolt's supposed in the midst of World War II, the engineers working at Republic Aviation and Pratt & Whitney had been tirelessly striving to resolve a critical issue that had long plagued their fighter aircraft: the notorious climb deficiency. This shortcoming significantly limited the aircraft's ability to ascend rapidly during combat, often giving enemy fighters an advantage in dogfights and tactical maneuvers. The engineers, aware of the urgency, embarked on developing a solution that would dramatically enhance the aircraft's vertical performance. Their breakthrough came with the installation of a specialized water-methanol injection system, which was designated as the anti-detonation injection, abbreviated as ADI. This innovative system was designed to spray a carefully balanced 50-50 mixture of water and methanol directly into the supercharger of the engine. The purpose of this mixture was twofold. First, to cool the compressed air entering the engine, thus preventing the onset of engine knocking or detonation, a problem that limited power and efficiency. And second, to allow the engine to produce significantly more horsepower without risking damage. Thanks to this modification, the engine, specifically the R2859 model, could now generate approximately 2,800 horsepower, a substantial increase from its original 2,000 horsepower. This represented an impressive 40% boost in power output, which fundamentally transformed the aircraft's overall performance envelope. The increased thrust enabled the fighter to climb faster and higher, giving it a decisive edge in aerial combat. Complementing this power boost were the newly installed Hamilton Standard hydraulic paddle blade propellers. These blades boasted an expansive 13-inch diameter and featured a broad, paddle-shaped design that allowed them to bite into the air with unprecedented efficiency. Replacing the older, less effective toothpick-style propellers, these new blades significantly enhanced the aircraft's climb rate and overall handling. The combination of increased engine power and superior propellers resulted in a fighter that could outperform previous models in vertical agility. The first units to receive these groundbreaking modifications were the 56th Fighter Group stationed at Boxted. In January of 1944, Lieutenant Colonel Francis Gabreski noted in his combat reports that German pilots, who had previously been able to escape by climbing to higher altitudes, were suddenly finding themselves pursued by the modified Thunderbolts even in steep climbs. The fighters, now equipped with the ADI system and improved propellers, maintained pursuit angles that had been unachievable just weeks prior. The water injection system could provide up to 5 minutes of emergency power, enough to turn what was once a sluggish aircraft into a veritable climbing monster. News of these remarkable enhancements quickly spread throughout the Luftwaffe, the German Air Force. Initially, many German pilots dismissed the reports as exaggeration or pilot error, believing that their counterparts were mistaken or misjudging the aircraft's capabilities. However, as German pilots encountered the modified fighters firsthand, they had no choice but to accept the reality of the extraordinary performance boost. One such German pilot was Feldwebel Kurt Bulligan of WWII. He had previously scored kills against P-47s in late 1943 by employing a tactic of attacking from above, flying a high-speed pass at the enemy, then zoom climbing away to gain altitude and escape. During these encounters, the American fighters struggled to follow him, and Bulligan believed he had the upper hand. But on February 14, 1944, just a day before his subsequent encounter near Marseille, Bulligan engaged a formation of Thunderbolts near Camry. He made his attack run on a trailing American fighter, scored hits on the engine cowling, and then initiated his climb to escape. To his astonishment, the damaged Thunderbolt pursued him relentlessly, its pilot activating the water injection system by pushing the throttle into its last eighth of travel. The engine note suddenly shifted from its normal roar to an almost supernatural sound, as if the aircraft had become a mythic beast. Bulligan watched in disbelief as his airspeed indicator began to fall, yet the massive American fighter somehow maintained its climb angle, defying the laws of physics. Realizing his predicament, Bulligan attempted to level off and escape in a dive, but the weight advantage of the Thunderbolt made this maneuver even more perilous. The technical details behind this astonishing transformation would have fascinated German engineers if they had known the full story. The ADI system functioned by injecting the water-methanol mixture directly into the eye of the General Electric C-23 turbo supercharger at a rate of approximately 6 gallons per minute. This mixture served multiple purposes. The water component absorbed heat through evaporation, significantly cooling the intake air by about 25%, while the methanol, with its high octane rating of 110, acted as an anti-detonant. This combination permitted the engine to operate under higher manifold pressures without risking self-destruction due to knocking, thereby unlocking more potential power from the engine. The cooling effect and increased octane rating collectively allowed the engine to sustain higher compression ratios, transforming the fighter into a much more formidable adversary. On a frigid day when temperatures hovered around 40 degrees Fahrenheit, the performance of the modified aircraft came into sharp focus. The key to this enhancement lay in the utilization of methanol, which has a notably lower boiling point, approximately 148.5 degrees Fahrenheit, compared to standard fuel. This meant that when injected into the engine's supercharger, methanol vaporized almost instantaneously upon entry. This rapid vaporization had a dual benefit. It provided significant cooling to the incoming charge, thereby increasing air density and improving combustion efficiency, and it served as an additional source of fuel energy to sustain more powerful engine performance. Thanks to this ingenious modification, the aircraft's engine could operate at a manifold pressure of around 70 inches of mercury, a substantial increase from the usual 52 inches. This boost in pressure translated into a remarkable increase in power, giving the aircraft a decisive edge in combat situations. The effects of these enhancements were profound, allowing the engine to produce more thrust, which in turn improved climb rates and overall agility during dogfights. Historically, the German military had encountered a damaged P-47 Thunderbolt in November of 1943 when Second Lieutenant William E. Roach of the United States Army Air Forces, serving with the 355th Fighter Group, made an emergency landing at a Luftwaffe airfield. This aircraft predated the water injection modifications, meaning German engineers had no prior knowledge of the advanced capabilities that such modifications could confer. Even if they had been aware, the reality was that the German aviation industry was already under severe strain. The intensifying Allied bombing campaigns had decimated much of their aircraft production capacity, leaving them unable to develop or incorporate similar technological innovations into their fighters. Consequently, the German pilots faced confrontations with the Thunderbolt that had been transformed into something markedly different and more formidable, rendering their existing aircraft seemingly outdated and less capable in combat. Meanwhile, the Italian Social Republic's Air Force, known as the Aeronautica Nazionale Repubblicana, also encountered these upgraded Thunderbolts, beginning on March 11, 1944. Major Adriano Visconti led a formation of Machi C-205 fighters into a combat engagement against a mixed group of American bombers and escort fighters. The Italian pilots, confident in their aircraft's agility, powered by licensed-built Daimler-Benz DB605 engines, believed they could outmaneuver and outfight the American fighters, which had previously been effective against earlier versions of the P-47. However, the encounter quickly proved to be a shock. Visconti watched in disbelief as a Thunderbolt that he had anticipated leaving behind in a climb persisted stubbornly in formation. The American pilot was pushing his throttle into what was known as war emergency power, an extra boost designed for critical situations, and deploying water-methanol mixture into the supercharger. This procedure dramatically increased engine output, with the paddle blade propeller biting into the air to maintain altitude with unprecedented efficiency. The result was a fighter that seemed almost to defy physics, matching the Italian aircraft's climb while maintaining a level of power that had previously been unattainable. Realizing the danger, Major Visconti was forced to break off his attack and dive away from the now significantly more powerful Thunderbolt. Later, he would report to his squadron commander that the American aircraft had undergone a transformation, turning into a different kind of adversary altogether. The once heavy and somewhat sluggish fighters had become aggressive and highly responsive, thanks to the water injection system that breathed new life into their engines. The Italian ace, Colonel Luigi Guerini, who had achieved notable success earlier in 1943 using the Machi C-205's superior climb rate and exceptional maneuverability to outfight larger, heavier American fighters, found himself in a similar predicament during a mission on March 18, 1944. While attempting to escape from an American P-47 D-22RE with the new modifications, Guerini engaged his usual tactics, climbing in a spiral to evade. But this time, the American pilot activated the water injection system, which allowed his Thunderbolt to sustain its climb with even greater power than before. Guerini's aircraft struggled to maintain airspeed as the engine roared with enhanced power, forcing him to perform a daring maneuver. He rolled the aircraft inverted and dove away. Utilizing the Veltros, the Italian nickname for the Machi C-205 superior roll rate, he managed to slip away from the pursuing Thunderbolt. Later, Guerini would report to his squadron that the Americans had somehow transformed their fighter into an entirely different and more lethal machine. The once heavy, cumbersome aircraft had become a swift, agile, and nearly unstoppable opponent, thanks to the innovative water injection system that had been adopted mid-war. In the Pacific theater, the shock of these technological improvements did not go unnoticed. The Japanese Army Air Force, particularly in October of 1944, encountered the upgraded Thunderbolt for the first time. Major Terahiko Kobayashi of the 244. In a daring attempt to gain an advantage over his adversaries, the pilot carefully activated his aircraft's water injection system, hoping to squeeze a little extra performance from his Thunderbolt. He believed that the fighter, which he thought was operating under a low-energy state, would now be able to hold its own, or perhaps even gain the upper hand. However, what unfolded next was nothing short of astonishing. With an almost surreal surge of power, a Thunderbolt, an aircraft that seemed to have been held back, suddenly erupted into a violent burst of energy, elevating with phenomenal speed and force that defied the expectations of even the most seasoned observers. The pilot, having engaged water injection, watched with a mixture of awe and disbelief as the massive American fighter, seemingly defying all aerodynamic logic, began to climb at an angle that should have immediately caused it to stall. The transformation was so profound that it appeared as if the aircraft had been completely reborn, now capable of performing feats previously thought impossible for its class. This remarkable display of power was made possible in part by the advanced paddle blade propellers that had been developed and tested long before this moment. During the initial test flights conducted in December of 1943, pioneering test pilot Lowry Brabham of the Republic Aviation Corporation had already discovered the significant advantages offered by the new Hamilton standard hydrodynamic propellers. These blades, with their generous 13-foot diameter, provided an unprecedented level of thrust at all altitudes. The broader blades were especially effective during climbs, where the older Curtiss electric propellers had demonstrated considerable inefficiency. With these modern paddle blade props, the Thunderbolt's climb rate could be improved by approximately 400 feet per minute, an impressive gain even without the aid of water injection. When these new propellers were combined with the aircraft differential injection ADI system, the results were nothing short of transformative. The aircraft's performance was dramatically enhanced, to the point where it seemed as though a new fighter had emerged from the old familiar shape of the Thunderbolt. It was now capable of engaging in maneuvers and achieving climb rates that previously had been out of reach, essentially rewriting the capabilities of the venerable aircraft. One of the most notable encounters with these upgraded Thunderbolts took place on the 23rd of February in the year of 1944. Hauptmann Heinzbar, a highly successful ace from Jägerschwader I, credited with over 200 aerial victories, was leading a formation of Fowler-Wolf FW-1988 fighters on a bomber interception mission near Frankfurt. As the engagement unfolded, he observed a familiar sight: 4 P-47 Thunderbolts from the 4th Fighter Group executing a diving attack on his formation, adopting the standard American attack pattern. However, what happened next stunned Heinzbar entirely. When he ordered his squadron to break into climbing spirals, an evasive maneuver that had historically been effective in escaping the Thunderbolt's grasp, he was astonished to see the American fighters follow them effortlessly. Their pursuit angles, which had previously been impossible to sustain, now seemed natural, as if these fighters had gained the climb performance of a much lighter, more agile aircraft. This newfound prowess forced Heinzbar to make the difficult decision to instruct his pilots to split up and attempt individual escapes, knowing that their chances of outrunning the Thunderbolts had drastically diminished. Later in his combat report, Heinzbar vividly described the scene, noting that the Americans seemed to have somehow endowed their heavy fighters with the sustained climb performance of a much more nimble aircraft, almost as if they had given their fighters the ability to ascend like a Messerschmitt. Of course, the initial implementation of this revolutionary system was not without its teething problems. When the first units of P-47 Thunderbolts in the European theater received water injection, ground crews encountered numerous failures. The root of the issue was traced back to improper handling of the ADI tanks, where some crews mistakenly filled the tanks with a mixture containing 30% ethanol instead of the required 50% methanol. This confusion, caused by supply mix-ups, resulted in engines detonating and failing during combat operations, significantly hampering operational readiness. Recognizing the urgency of the situation, Pratt & Whitney dispatched their engineer, Bill Claus, to England in February of 1944 to address the mounting issues. Through meticulous investigation, Claus discovered that many crew chiefs and ground personnel did not fully understand the critical importance of the precise mixture ratio. The methanol wasn't simply an antifreeze additive, it was an essential component that served multiple vital functions. Specifically, the correct mixture provided crucial cooling properties, prevented engine detonation, and contributed additional energy to the combustion process. Without the proper mixture, engines risked catastrophic failure at crucial moments in combat. Meanwhile, reports of the upgraded fighters' performance began reaching the highest levels of command. Lieutenant General Adolf Galland, commander of the Luftwaffe's fighter forces, received increasingly alarmed reports from his squadron leaders about in the midst of a seemingly routine interception, the German pilots found themselves falling into an increasingly embarrassing predicament. What was intended as a straightforward attack quickly spiraled into a humiliating episode when a squadron of American P-47 Thunderbolts, patrolling nearby, spotted their presence and promptly gave chase. The German fighters, led by the famed Messerschmitt squadron, attempted to escape with a steep climb, and maneuver that should have been beyond their limits, but was suddenly within reach thanks to the formidable American response. Major Galland, observing through binoculars from a vantage point, watched with a mixture of awe and disbelief as the massive American fighters maintained pursuit angles that directly contradicted all prior intelligence reports about their capabilities. This unexpected resilience and agility in the P-47s were startling. They defied previous assumptions about their performance, especially in such steep climbs, which had traditionally been a German advantage. The secret behind the American fighters' enhanced performance was their use of a water-methanol injection system, a technology that had already seen initial testing by the Germans themselves on their BMW 801 radial engines under the designation MW50. This system involved injecting a mixture of water and methanol into the engine's intake, effectively cooling the charged air, which allowed the engine to produce higher horsepower without risking damage from excessive heat. Despite the potential, the Germans had faced significant production issues and the intricate complexity of implementing such a system, which limited its widespread deployment among their aircraft. In stark contrast, the United States had rapidly integrated this technology across their entire P-47 Thunderbolt fleet within a matter of months. They managed to retrofit older aircraft in the field, while simultaneously rolling out new production models equipped with water injection as standard. This feat underscored the remarkable industrial capacity of the Americans, a capacity that the struggling German war economy could not match, even when they understood the underlying technology. The American ability to quickly adapt and incorporate technological advancements gave their fighters a decisive edge in combat. One of the most notable encounters with a water-injected Thunderbolt was experienced by Major Gunther R. of WWII 11, a fighter wing that would go on to tally a staggering 200 Tier-75 aerial victories by the end of the war. On the 3rd of March 1944, Major R engaged his first water-injected P-47 while attacking a formation of B-17 flying fortresses near Berlin. His tactic was typical. He dove into the bomber formation, targeting a vulnerable aircraft, and then looked to escape by climbing away on the opposite side, a maneuver that had proved effective countless times before. However, as he pulled up from his attack run, he found himself unable to shake the pursuing American fighter. The pilot from the 359th Fighter Group was pushing his throttle into what was known as war emergency power, a setting designed for maximum output, made possible by the water-methanol cooling system. As the engine roared at approximately 2,800 horsepower, the sound alone was enough to send a shiver through German pilots who realized their traditional tactics might no longer guarantee safety. Major R's Messerschmitt was forced into a frantic series of violent, desperate maneuvers, sharp turns, dives, climbs, in a bid to evade the relentless pursuit of the Thunderbolt. He employed every trick he had learned over 4 years of combat, striving to outmaneuver his opponent amid the chaos of aerial combat. The psychological impact on German pilots was profound. The sense of invincibility they had previously enjoyed over the Thunderbolt evaporated almost overnight. These fighters, once considered easier prey, now proved to be formidable adversaries capable of matching in climb, outdiving with dramatic superiority, and absorbing tremendous amounts of damage, sometimes riddled with bullets, yet still delivering devastating firepower with their 8.50 caliber machine guns. This dramatic shift in aerial combat was not merely a matter of technological superiority, but also a reflection of the increased experience among American pilots, who had learned to exploit their aircraft's strengths to the fullest. The arrival of seasoned fighters, skilled in maximizing the capabilities of the P-47, created a perfect storm that decisively altered the aerial balance over Europe. Among the German pilots newly confronted with this evolution was Hermann Graf of Jagdgeschwader 52. Transferred from the Eastern Front, where he had accumulated more than 200 aerial victories against Soviet aircraft, he arrived in France in February 1944, expecting similar success against the Western Allies. However, his first encounter with the newly upgraded Thunderbolts on February 28th nearly ended in catastrophe. Believing he had identified a vulnerable P-47 straggling behind its formation, he engaged with confidence, only to discover too late that his assumption was incorrect. As he closed in for the attack, the American pilot responded swiftly, slamming his throttle forward into the water injection mode, unleashing the full might of his engine. The resulting engine note roared with unprecedented power, echoing through the skies, as the American fighter demonstrated its enhanced performance capabilities. This encounter. As the fierce dogfight intensified, the fighter aircraft suddenly surged upward with startling force, causing a dramatic clash with a banshee-like wail of the skies. In the chaos of this aerial melee, the renowned pilot of the Graf's Messerschmitt found himself forced to make a daring escape. He dove sharply at full throttle, desperately trying to avoid being caught by the enemy. His quick reflexes and expert control allowed him to slip away just in time, slipping below the enemy's line of sight. The veteran ace, who had flown countless battles and had seen many kinds of fighters, whether German, Soviet, British, or American, later confessed that he had never encountered an aircraft that could climb with such violent, almost ferocious power as what he had just witnessed. The sheer force and speed of the climb left him both awestruck and bewildered. Meanwhile, from the Japanese perspective, the scene was equally astonishing, though observed from different theaters of combat. Lieutenant Colonel Kojiro Takahashi, commanding the 51st Senti flying a Nakajima K-44 Shoki interceptor, was engaged in a tense encounter over Burma in May of the year 1944. His aircraft, meticulously designed and optimized for rapid ascent, believed it could easily outclimb the heavier American fighters, specifically the 47 D-25 variants. Takahashi approached confidently, thinking his lighter fighter would prove superior in vertical performance. However, as the engagement unfolded, he watched in mounting disbelief as a Thunderbolt, an American fighter that he thought was trapped at a low altitude, suddenly erupted skywards with an astonishing burst of power that defied all expectations. The American pilot, having activated water injection to boost engine performance, managed to push his aircraft into a vertical climb that seemed physically impossible for such a heavy machine. Despite the K-44's remarkable climb rate, it was unable to maintain the pursuit angle as the American fighter, powered by the water injection system, surged upward with unprecedented force. The Japanese pilot was caught off guard, unable to match the extraordinary acceleration, and was ultimately compelled to break off his attack. He quickly reported back to his headquarters that the Americans had somehow transformed their formidable fighters into something almost supernatural, aircraft that seemed to defy the laws of physics. This technological leap was not solely attributable to engine enhancements. The engineers at Republic had undertaken a comprehensive overhaul of the Thunderbolt's design. They reinforced the already robust airframe to withstand the increased stresses brought on by the potent 2,800 horsepower engines. Structural modifications included strengthening the engine mounts, upgrading the oil cooling systems to manage the additional heat generated during emergency power conditions, and redesigning the propeller governor to handle the immense loads exerted by the massive paddle blade propellers. These innovations resulted in an integrated system capable of pushing the aircraft far beyond its original performance envelope. Remarkably, despite these modifications, the legendary durability of the P-47 remained intact, allowing the aircraft to endure severe battle damage and still return its pilot safely home. Across the European theater, a different yet equally remarkable encounter took place. Captain Franco Bordoni of Italy's Aeronautica Nazionale, Repubblicana's second fighter group, was flying a Fiat G-55 Centauro, often regarded by experts as Italy's finest fighter aircraft, when he engaged in combat near Turin on the 2nd of April, 1944. Leading a formation of 4 Italian fighters, Bordoni was involved in an attack against American fighter bombers, targeting vital rail yard facilities. Confident in the G-55's excellent climbing and maneuvering capabilities, he expected to gain a significant advantage over the heavier P-47's Ds. As they dove into the attack, the Italians anticipated a swift and decisive assault. However, the American fighters responded with extraordinary agility. One of the pilots, utilizing the water injection system to its fullest, pushed his aircraft into a rapid climb that Bordoni found utterly unbelievable. The massive Thunderbolt, which should have struggled to ascend at such an angle under its weight, suddenly accelerated upwards with a force that seemed almost supernatural. The climb was so steep and swift that it appeared to violate the principles of aerodynamics, forcing Bordoni's formation into chaos as they scattered in a desperate attempt to evade the seemingly invincible American aircraft. The Italian pilot later reported that the Americans had somehow imbued their fighters with what he described as supernatural powers. Their ability to perform extraordinary climbs seemingly defied the limitations of physics. The water injection system played a crucial role in enabling these astonishing performances. It typically used a carefully calibrated mixture, usually a 50-50 ratio of water and methanol, though some units experimented with ratios as high as 100% methanol, as 60% methanol, and 40% water to maximize effects. The water component served primarily as a cooling agent, thanks to its high latent heat of vaporization, absorbing around 900 BTUs per pound, significantly more than gasoline's 150 BTUs, thus preventing engine overheating during intensive high-power maneuvers. When injected, the water vaporized immediately, not only cooling the intake charge, but the development of the ER2800 engine's high-octane fuel compatibility represented a significant leap forward in aviation technology. This special fuel, with its elevated octane rating, enabled the engine to operate at substantially higher power levels than conventional fuels could support. Such a combination meant that the 2,800 Rand could deliver performance figures that previously would have caused catastrophic engine knocking or engine damage if standard fuel had been used alone. This breakthrough allowed aircraft powered by the R2800 to achieve extraordinary thrust and climb capabilities, fundamentally changing the tactical possibilities for fighter aircraft during the war. Major Wilhelm Hoffmann, a seasoned officer assigned to the JG-3 unit stationed at Salzstettel, had meticulously devised a set of tactical approaches tailored specifically to exploit the known weaknesses of the P-47 Thunderbolt fighters. His strategy emphasized attacking from advantageous angles, preferably from above, executing a single decisive firing pass, and then quickly retreating by climbing steeply. This maneuver was designed to take advantage of the Thunderbolt's formidable firepower and armor, while avoiding prolonged engagement that would give the heavier American fighters an opportunity to outmaneuver or counterattack. Hoffmann trained his pilots to execute these tactics with precision, believing that their success depended heavily on their ability to avoid the American fighters' better endurance and climbing ability. However, on the 8th of March in the year 1944, during a high-stakes interception mission involving B-24 Liberator bombers escorted by P-47s from the 355th Fighter Group, Hoffmann's carefully crafted plan was unexpectedly shattered. As he led his squadron into what was supposed to be a straightforward attack run, he witnessed an astonishing turn of events. The P-47 suddenly demonstrated a climb performance that rivaled or even surpassed that of the German Messerschmitt fighters they were supposed to outclass. His pilots, communicating rapidly over the radio, sounded alarms as the American fighters, those very aircraft that should have been lagging behind in pursuit, continued to maintain their pursuit with relentless determination. The extraordinary performance was largely attributable to the remarkable water injection system integrated into the P-47 engines. As the fighters pushed their engines to maximum power, the water injection system's scream filled the air, enabling the Pratt & Whitney R2800 engines to produce unprecedented levels of thrust. This system effectively cooled the engine and suppressed knocking, allowing the engine to operate at a much higher power output safely. The result was a dramatic transformation of the aerial combat landscape, turning what was once a predictable engagement into a dynamic and unpredictable dogfight. The development of such powerful and efficient paddle blade propellers had preceded the water injection upgrade, stemming from engineering efforts by Hamilton Standard engineers. Recognizing that the original Curtiss electric propellers installed on the Thunderbolt were optimized primarily for high-speed cruise rather than for rapid climbs, these engineers sought to improve the aircraft's climb rate by redesigning the propellers. The original narrow blades were inefficient at converting the R2800's substantial torque into thrust at lower speeds, which limited the fighter's performance during critical climbing maneuvers. To address this, they developed a hydrostatic paddle blade design featuring broader blades with modified angles that could better handle the engine's torque output across a wider range of speeds. Each blade in this new design was individually balanced and carefully matched to minimize vibrations while maximizing thrust efficiency throughout the aircraft's entire performance envelope. These new paddle blade propellers alone added approximately 400 feet per minute to the Thunderbolt's climb rate, a significant improvement even before the water injection system was engaged. When combined, these innovations multiplied the aircraft's overall power and agility, allowing the P-47 to ascend more rapidly and with greater authority, effectively turning it into a much more formidable combat platform. Meanwhile, on the other side of the Pacific Theater, Lieutenant Yoshio Yoshida, flying a Kawasaki K-61 Hen, powered by a liquid-cooled engine comparable to the German Daimler-Benz DB601, encountered the upgraded P-47s over Formosa in January of 1945. His aircraft represented the latest Japanese design, but even it was no match for the enhanced American fighters. Yoshida observed that the Thunderbolt, which he had once regarded as a somewhat sluggish fighter, now displayed an astonishing level of performance. The P-47 climbed with remarkable authority, maintaining a speed that his K-61 engine simply could not match. Faced with such overwhelming power and agility, Yoshida barely managed to escape by diving into cloud cover, retreating from what had become an increasingly dangerous encounter. In his diary, Yoshida later reflected on these encounters, describing the upgraded Thunderbolt as a monster that seemed to defy the natural laws of aviation physics. He marveled at the aircraft's ability to climb swiftly and maintain high speeds, a feat that seemed almost supernatural compared to the earlier versions of the fighter. This transformation in performance was not merely a matter of incremental improvement, but represented a fundamental leap forward in aerial combat capability, leveraging advanced engineering, innovative materials, and fuel technology. The strategic implications of these technological advancements extended far beyond individual dogfights. During the course of the strategic bombing campaigns over Europe, the German Luftwaffe found itself facing a significant challenge. The Americans had begun deploying new tactics and technological modifications that genuinely altered the balance of aerial combat. One of the most impactful innovations was the development of specially designed high-altitude combat positions, carefully constructed to provide cover so formidable that American fighters could no longer exploit weaknesses or gain advantageous positions. These defensive arrangements fundamentally shifted the previously predictable dynamics of aerial engagements, complicating the Luftwaffe's efforts to counter the Allied air offensive. In northern Italy, Oberst Johannes Steinhoff, who was commanding the fighter wing JG-77, started receiving initial reports about these new, transformed American Thunderbolt fighters, the P-47s, in March of the year 1944. At first, he and his fellow pilots found it difficult to believe that these aircraft could be matching, or in some cases even surpassing, the climb performance of their traditional adversary, the Messerschmitt Bf-109 G-14. This disbelief persisted until Steinhoff himself led a sortie on March 15th, during which he engaged American fighter bombers near Bologna. In the midst of this combat, he was unexpectedly pursued by a P-47 D-27, a variant of the Thunderbolt equipped with an innovative feature, water injection. This pilot activated the aircraft's water injection system, a modification designed to temporarily boost engine power during critical moments. The resulting climb performance was so extraordinary that Steinhoff's fighter was compelled to employ every ounce of his considerable experience and skill to evade his pursuer. He later reported to Luftwaffe headquarters that somehow the Americans had managed to eliminate the Thunderbolt's previously perceived greatest weakness overnight. This breakthrough was chiefly attributed to the strategic use of water-methanol injection, which dramatically enhanced the aircraft's power output during short bursts of maximum effort. The water injection system consumed approximately 6 gallons of water-methanol mixture per hour when used at war emergency power settings. Most P-47s carried 15-gallon tanks, which allowed for roughly 5 minutes of sustained maximum boost. A critical window during combat, but one that demanded meticulous management by pilots. They had to carefully decide when to utilize their limited supply of the mixture, often reserving it for decisive moments, either to break away from a dangerous situation or to continue pursuing an enemy, climbing into the altitude advantage. This tactical nuance transformed the water injection into both a technical asset and a psychological weapon. German pilots could never be certain whether a Thunderbolt had already spent its precious 5 minutes of enhanced performance, or if it still wielded the full power of the system, ready to surge into maneuvers that had previously been thought impossible. The psychological impact was profound. The element of uncertainty meant that the Thunderbolt pilots could strike fear into their adversaries simply by activating their water injection at unpredictable moments. Conversely, German pilots had to constantly guess whether their opponents still possessed the burst of monster performance adding an element of psychological suspense to every encounter. Among the most renowned American pilots was Major Eric Hartmann, the top-scoring ace of the Luftwaffe, with a total of 352 confirmed victories. Although most of his combat experience was gained on the Eastern Front against Soviet aircraft, Hartmann was temporarily transferred to JG-53 in Romania in April of 1944. There he encountered P-47 D-28 variants from the United States Army Air Force's 8th Air Force, which was escorting bomber formations attacking the Ploiești oil refineries, critical strategic targets. Hartmann anticipated that these American fighters would be relatively easy prey compared to the Soviet Yak-9s and L-7s he had previously faced, but he quickly realized that the Thunderbolts displayed climb performance that exceeded anything he had previously encountered. In one particularly notable engagement, a P-47 D-28 pursued Hartmann's aircraft through a series of vertical maneuvers, which should have been impossible for such a heavily built American fighter. Hartmann managed to escape only through superior tactical positioning, quick thinking, and the extensive experience he had amassed over years of combat. Later, he remarked that the Americans had somehow transformed their flying tanks into what he described as rocket ships, capable of feats previously thought impossible for their aircraft. This evolution in American aircraft technology and tactics posed a severe challenge to the Germans' ability to respond effectively. The strategic bombing campaigns aimed at German aircraft manufacturing plants, such as those at Regensburg and Augsburg, were relentless. These attacks kept the factories under continuous threat, preventing the Germans from developing or deploying effective countermeasures for the new American fighters, even when they understood the technological advancements at play. Meanwhile, the manufacturing plants of BMW and Daimler-Benz, responsible for producing engines like the BMW 801 radial and Daimler-Benz 65 inline engines, struggled to keep pace with wartime demands. They faced severe difficulties in maintaining the production of existing engine designs and, more critically, in developing new systems such as water injection. Relying heavily on both tactical skill and extensive combat experience, the pilots faced opponents who now possessed both numerical superiority and performance capabilities rivaling their own. Among the notable figures was Captain Colonnello Mario Bellegami, commanding the 5th Group of the Aeronautica Nazionale Repubblicana, ANR, which employed Fiat G-55 Centauro fighters. On April 25, 1944, Bellegami led a formation into combat against American bomber formations, marking the last significant engagement before Allied forces targeted and ultimately destroyed Italy's Fiat aircraft manufacturing facilities. During this confrontation, the Italian fighters encountered P-47 D-39 Thunderbolts from the 325th Fighter Group, whose pilots swiftly responded by activating water injection systems to enhance engine cooling and power. The American pilots immediately engaged the Italian fighters, pushing their aircraft into water injection mode the moment the Italians appeared. The Thunderbolts soared to match the Centauro's altitude meter for meter, their formidable 850 caliber machine guns unleashing a devastating cone of fire that tore through the Italian formations. Despite their tactical prowess, Bellegami's squadron suffered the loss of 3 aircraft, including the wingman, who had fought valiantly alongside him, before managing a narrow escape. The surviving Italian pilots later reported that the performance of the American fighters had been beyond their expectations, so extraordinary that their intelligence briefings had failed to anticipate such capabilities. Initially, American crew chiefs had expressed concerns over the mechanical reliability of the water injection system. They worried that the added complexity could introduce new failure points, potentially compromising the aircraft during critical moments. However, Pratt & Whitney engineers designed the system with durability and simplicity in mind, employing straightforward pressure injection rather than intricate metering mechanisms. The water-methanol mixture was stored in specially protected tanks, with heated lines to prevent freezing at high altitudes. Activation of the system was remarkably simple. By pushing the throttle past a mechanical gate located at the last eighth of its travel, the pilot could engage water injection effortlessly. This design was intentionally made pilot-proof, ensuring the system would function reliably when needed, but would not activate accidentally during routine flying. Meanwhile, on the other side of the conflict, Japan's best fighter, the Kawasaki K-84, flown by Captain Satoshi Yamada of the 85th Sentai, engaged American P-47 Thunderbolts over Okinawa in April of 1945. Yamada was confident that his aircraft's excellent performance characteristics would give him an edge in combat, especially against the massive American fighters. However, he was soon met with a transformed opponent that could match his climbs, surpass his dive speeds, and endure tremendous damage from his 20mm cannons while retaliating with devastating 850 caliber machine gun fire. Yamada watched in disbelief as a Thunderbolt, damaged by his cannon fire, continued climbing on water injection, black smoke billowing from its engine, but still maintaining pursuit. This aircraft's pilot fought on despite the engine's failing condition, illustrating the remarkable durability enabled by the water injection system. Yamada's ammunition eventually depleted, forcing him to retreat as the American fighters demonstrated an ability to absorb damage and keep fighting, an indication that the once advantageous German position had shifted dramatically. The morale among German pilots and their allies plummeted as they realized that the Americans, armed with these advanced fighters, had not only caught up in numbers, but had developed an edge in performance that was difficult to counter. The psychological impact was magnified by the terrifying appearance of the Thunderbolts when operating on water injection, the engines trailing faint wisps of vapor resembling steam, and the sound shifting from the roar of a radial engine to an almost supernatural howl. Veteran German pilots described this eerie noise as the sound of approaching death, a haunting herald of the new American dominance. No longer were these massive American fighters merely escorts for bombers. They had become predators in their own right, capable of matching any Luftwaffe fighter in vertical performance and agility. This shift in aerial power dynamics was a profound blow to the German morale, as their pilots faced an enemy that could perform with terrifying efficiency across multiple dimensions of combat. The development and deployment of the water injection system had played a crucial role in enabling these fighters to operate at peak performance under combat conditions, turning the tide of air superiority and forcing their adversaries to confront a new and formidable reality in the skies. In the waning days of the Second World War, the commanding officers and pilots of the Allied air forces found themselves facing an increasingly formidable adversary in the form of the upgraded Republic P-47 Thunderbolt, an aircraft that had undergone significant technological transformation. These modernized Thunderbolts were now powered by the revolutionary Mi-262 jet fighter technology, which had begun to redefine aerial combat and challenge the dominance of traditional piston engine fighters. The sight of these jet fighters operating over the airfield at Akmer in November of 1944 became a stark reminder that even the most advanced piston engine aircraft, such as the Thunderbolt, had to contend with the new era of aerial warfare ushered in by jet propulsion. On that day, observers noted the formidable presence of German aircraft, including the Mi-262S, which flew with remarkable agility and speed. It was evident that the American fighters had to adapt rapidly to this transformation in the enemy's capabilities. The Mi-262, with its groundbreaking water injection systems, could accelerate rapidly during climbs, allowing it to reach a speed and altitude that often outmatched the piston-powered Thunderbolts. These water injection systems worked by spraying a mixture of water and methanol into the engine intake, providing a temporary boost in power, sometimes enough to outpace or outclimb the American fighters that tried to intercept them. In one particular encounter, a German pilot flying the AP-47 D-30 was able to activate water injection, briefly maintaining pursuit of a retreating Mi-262. The American pilot, flying a Thunderbolt, narrowly escaped being caught because the German fighter's water supply, which lasted only about 5 minutes, was exhausted just before he could close the distance to firing range. This brief chase highlighted the tactical importance of water injection on the Mi-262, which could significantly enhance its performance, but was limited by the duration of its water supply. The strategic story of this period was also reflected in the production figures. The United States had manufactured more than 15,000 Thunderbolts, an unparalleled number of any American fighter aircraft, demonstrating the massive industrial capacity supporting their war effort. Companies like Curtiss-Wright and Ford, under license, contributed thousands more to this total, allowing the United States to quickly implement crucial modifications across their entire fleet. These modifications included the integration of water injection systems and paddle blade propellers, which significantly increased performance and adaptability in combat situations. Meanwhile, German aircraft production faced mounting difficulties. The relentless Allied bombing campaigns, shortages of critical strategic materials, and the loss of experienced technicians and workers to military service severely hampered their ability to produce and maintain aircraft at the levels needed to counter the Allied air offensive. The Luftwaffe found itself increasingly overwhelmed, forced to confront a rising tide of transformed Thunderbolts, aircraft that had been adapted with the latest American innovations, using dwindling resources and often inferior equipment. One notable engagement took place near Milan on April 26 of 1944, just a day after the execution of Benito Mussolini and a mere 2 days before the German surrender in Italy. Major Giovanni Benet, commanding the 3rd Group of the Italian Air Force's Aeronautica Nazionale Repubblicana, ANR, led a small formation of Italian fighters. Among them were the rare Messerschmitt Bf-109 G-10s, which had been supplied from Germany. They encountered a formation of P-47D Thunderbolts from the U.S. 57th Fighter Group during what became one of the final Axis fighter missions in the Mediterranean theater. The American Thunderbolts immediately responded to the appearance of the Messerschmitts and, true to modern development, engaged their water injection systems to gain the upper hand. The American pilots demonstrated exceptional climb performance, which astonished Major Benet and his compatriots. Despite the formidable German engineer Bf-109 G-10S, which were known for their speed and agility, the P-47s were able to outclimb, outmaneuver, and attempt to outfight them. The German fighters, despite their impressive performance, could not escape. Only the intervention of German anti-aircraft artillery batteries forced the American pilots to break off their pursuit. This encounter vividly illustrated the technological and tactical advantages that the American modifications provided, especially the capabilities introduced by water injection. The effect of water injection on engine wear and operational reliability was initially a matter of concern. Engineers and mechanics feared that boosting engine power with water-methanol mixtures might accelerate wear and lead to premature engine failure. However, extensive testing and operational experience revealed surprising results. Pratt & Whitney, the manufacturers of the P-47 engines, discovered that this mixture actually helped reduce peak combustion temperatures. This cooling effect prevented excessive thermal stress on the engine's valves and pistons, thereby protecting critical components from heat damage even during extended periods of high-power operation. As a result, pilots could push their engines to around 2,800 horsepower during combat without an unacceptable increase in engine failure rates. Despite this technological leap, crew chiefs were still instructed to observe engines very carefully after extensive use of water injection, checking for signs amidst the vast expanse of the Pacific theater. A new variant of aircraft was introduced, boasting an increased fuel capacity specifically designed to enable long-distance flights over the expansive oceanic stretches that characterize the region. As these formidable American fighters demonstrated their remarkable capabilities, it became evident that their performance far surpassed that of the specialized interceptors previously developed by the Axis powers. These fighters soared to incredible altitudes, where the engines of the K-44s, despite their formidable design, began to struggle under the intense demands of such heights. However, the Americans had equipped their aircraft with a turbo supercharging system that was further enhanced by water injection, ensuring that the engines maintained full power even in the most demanding conditions. Meanwhile, reports from Kourou, relayed to the Imperial General Headquarters, indicated that the Americans had pioneered a fighter aircraft that challenged the very limits of conventional aeronautical engineering. This aircraft was capable of escorting bombers across thousands of miles, a feat that had seemed impossible just a short time before, and could seamlessly switch to high-performance combat at virtually any altitude. The technological leap represented by innovations such as water injection in engines and the adoption of paddle blade propellers marked a profound shift in both industrial capability and engineering philosophy. These advancements showcased an ability to quickly identify weaknesses, develop effective solutions, and implement them across entire fleets of aircraft within mere months. In stark contrast, the Axis powers found themselves struggling to maintain production levels of their existing aircraft designs. Their engineers, while fully understanding the technological principles underlying these innovations, lacked the necessary resources and industrial capacity to incorporate them widely. As a result, their pilots faced increasingly transformed opponents that appeared to have outstripped their own aircraft, which suddenly seemed outdated and less effective by comparison. The once supremacist edge in technological superiority was shifting decisively toward the Allies, heralding a pivotal moment in the aerial war as it approached its most critical phase. One notable example of this shift was the actions of Hauptmann Herbertfeld, who commanded the first squadron of the WWII. On March the 18th of the year 1945, Herbertfeld led one of the final large-scale Luftwaffe fighter operations aimed at countering American bombers. In this decisive engagement, his squadron assembled every available Messerschmitt and Fowler-Wolf aircraft, marshaling their forces for a maximum effort against the B-17 and B-24 bombers attacking Berlin. During the encounter, they faced 47D models from the 56th Fighter Group, units whose pilots had been utilizing water injection technology for over a year to bolster their aircraft's performance. Witnessing the prowess of these transformed Thunderbolts, the Japanese pilots found themselves helpless as American fighters, which should have been vulnerable during their climb phases, pursued relentlessly through every evasive maneuver. The water injection systems granted the 47s the ability to sustain pursuit angles that would have been impossible just 18 months earlier, effectively nullifying the advantage of altitude or maneuverability. The result was a tragic loss of 6 Japanese aircraft, with none of the bombers being shot down, marking a significant and somber turning point. The effective end of organized Luftwaffe resistance in the face of increasingly advanced American air power. The Japanese Navy's experience with high-performance fighters was embodied by their elite 343rd Kokutai, which was equipped with the best fighters available, including the Kawanishi N-1K2J Shindenkai. In July of 1945, they encountered 47s over their homeland, expecting to face slow-moving American escort fighters. Instead, they found themselves confronted by 47s demonstrating performance levels beyond what intelligence reports had suggested. The American fighters demonstrated an ability to climb with authoritative speed and maintain it effortlessly, while their maneuverability seemed to surpass expectations. The water injection systems once again played a pivotal role, allowing American pilots to pursue Japanese fighters through complex maneuvers that should have caused them to stall or become vulnerable. During these encounters, Lieutenant Commander Genda Minoru led 12 fighters into battle, only to realize that the Thunderbolt's performance was so elevated that withdrawal was the only prudent option. In his post-mission reflections, Genda wrote that the Americans' fighters appeared to possess supernatural qualities, defying the conventional logic of aeronautical engineering and leaving Japanese pilots in awe. This phenomenon reached its dramatic climax in the final months of the war, as German pilots flying the ultimate variants of their fighters, including the Bf-109K4 models equipped with the distinct DB engines, faced a similar onslaught. These aircraft represented the zenith of German aeronautical technology, but even they found themselves increasingly outmatched by the rapidly advancing Allied innovations. In these last desperate days, the air war had evolved into a contest of technological supremacy, where the innovations of water injection, turbo supercharging, and advanced aerodynamics played decisive roles. The Allies' ability to rapidly develop, produce, and deploy these sophisticated systems marked a turning point that ultimately tilted the balance of power in the P-47 Thunderbolt, a formidable pillar of American air power during the Second World War, underwent a remarkable transformation that elevated it from a serviceable fighter to a truly dominant force in aerial combat. Originally designed as a rugged, dependable aircraft capable of withstanding heavy punishment and carrying substantial payloads, the Thunderbolt's true potential was unlocked through a series of innovative modifications that redefined what it could achieve in the skies. Among these, the most significant were the implementation of water-methanol injection systems and the adaptation of paddle blade propellers, both of which dramatically enhanced the aircraft's performance and shifted the balance of aerial dominance. At the outset, American pilots flying the Thunderbolt could rely on its impressive robustness and firepower, but their German counterparts flying aircraft like the FW-190D9 with their potent Jumo 213A engines and the high-altitude fighters such as the TA-152H believed they held the upper hand. These German aircraft, built with advanced aeronautical engineering, had the edge in raw engine power and altitude performance, giving their pilots a false sense of superiority. However, this advantage was gradually eroded as the Thunderbolt was equipped with innovative features that erased the performance gap that German pilots had banked on. Water injection, for example, introduced a form of chemical intercooling that allowed the P-47 to sustain higher power output for longer periods, effectively boosting engine performance without requiring a complete redesign of the engine itself. This simple yet ingenious modification enabled pilots to punch through tough combat situations with increased speed and agility, transforming the Thunderbolt into a more versatile and lethal aircraft. Simultaneously, the adoption of paddle blade propellers demonstrated a crucial understanding of the importance of matching propeller design to specific operational requirements. Unlike traditional propellers, these paddle blade variants were optimized to extract maximum thrust at high speeds, providing better acceleration, climb rate, and overall maneuverability. This shift away from accepting standard, compromised propeller solutions underscored a broader lesson in aircraft design, that tailoring components to performance goals can yield substantial gains. The combined influence of water injection and specialized propellers proved that relatively straightforward modifications could have a profound impact on an aircraft's capabilities. The implications of these technological advances extended far beyond mere statistics or single-engine performance figures. They symbolized a fundamental change in military aviation philosophy, illustrating that incremental and accessible improvements could dramatically alter the capabilities of existing aircraft platforms. This paradigm shift proved that major redesigns were not always necessary to achieve significant performance gains. Instead, clever engineering tweaks and a focus on optimizing existing systems could produce results on par with more complex overhauls. Water-methanol injection, in particular, served as a form of chemical intercooling, allowing engines to produce power levels that previously would have demanded extensive and costly redesigns, thus making the Thunderbolt more competitive in a variety of combat scenarios. Moreover, the paddle blade propellers exemplified the importance of precision in aircraft component matching. By refining the relationship between engine power, propeller design, and performance requirements, engineers created a more harmonious and effective powertrain. This lesson in tailored engineering would influence aeronautical development for many years, setting a precedent for future fighter designs that prioritize specific performance parameters over generic solutions. The culmination of these modifications was nothing short of transformative. The Thunderbolt, once considered a somewhat bulky and straightforward aircraft, was now capable of matching and even surpassing the performance of its Axis adversaries. It became a symbol of American industrial capacity and engineering ingenuity, demonstrating that systematic and strategic improvements could turn quantity into quality. This was the moment when American technological and manufacturing strength, backed by relentless innovation, managed to overcome the supposedly insurmountable technical superiority of the Axis powers. It was a turning point that marked the awakening of a sleeping giant in the skies, an awakening fueled by the combination of tactical innovation, engineering excellence, and relentless determination. American pilots suddenly found themselves confronting German and Japanese aircraft equipped with advanced engines and high-altitude capabilities, but now matched or exceeded in climb rate and speed thanks to these modifications. The once comfortable German advantage, built on technical supremacy and strategic positioning, was rapidly eroding amid clouds of water-methanol vapor and the scream of engines delivering over 2,800 horsepower. Numerically speaking, the results spoke for themselves with relentless clarity. American Thunderbolt pilots claimed more than 7,000 aerial victories across Europe alone, maintaining an impressive kill-to-loss ratio of approximately 4.6 to 1. Such extraordinary statistics would have been inconceivable without the revolutionary modifications that had enhanced the aircraft's performance. The transformation turned the Thunderbolt from a merely competent energy fighter into a dominant aerial contender, capable of going head-to-head with any Axis fighter on equal terms or even superior ones. Initially, the German, Italian, and Japanese pilots dismissed the Thunderbolt as a lumbering, ground attack aircraft, an overgrown workhorse not suited for the kinds of dogfighting that the more agile Axis fighters excelled at. Yet they learned too late that American engineers had effectively awakened a dormant giant in Dowing.